Okay, so for the new year, I've decided to start doing more Sims again. It's been a while since I've dove into this regularly. I've gotten a bit rusty, and it's always better to keep studying because I don't want to get left behind. So, the first spot I'm going to study is early position versus button flats, which is a spot I think I'm pretty weak at. And my goal is to at least once a week put out a sim video for each of these boards that I have on the screen. So 884 is the starting board that we'll do today. We'll do a rainbow and a two-tone board. And then I'll have a node lock for an out of position auto c-bet. And then we'll just go through each of these boards. And I'll count each board as its own sim, so hopefully get one of those out a week at the very least, but probably going to do more. It feels good to study again, so hopefully we can keep it rolling and churn these out so I can learn. Let's dive right on into it. The first board that I have is 884 Rainbow, and we're going to be starting 100 blinds deep, and so I said that there's no ante, there's no rake. Under that it opens to 3x, button flats, and the blinds fold, so we have 7.5 big blinds, and we're 100 blinds deep. Quick look at out of positions opening. So this isn't under the gun range, or pretty tight under the gun range, about 15%. I think this isn't necessarily for cash or for MTTs, but understand that rake will affect your decisions. So I probably will not open these suited aces, and probably not even the wheel aces in a heavily raked environment under the gun. And definitely not going to be opening hands like King 9 suited, excuse me, or King Jack offsuit, Ace 10 offsuit. They're just too weak with rake. Pocket fives, pocket sixes as well, probably cut off, so I'll probably be cutting these off. And in an MTT with no rake, probably going to be opening these hands a lot, especially the suited aces. Looking at kind of a button flatting range, I think that this isn't necessarily the range I would play. I think that most of the time I would be folding these kind of these aces you can't make a straight with, but I might be losing EV with those in an MTT and in a raked cash game. Definitely going to be folding. These suited wheel aces can be worked in as 3-bets or flats or folds. I think all are fine. And these pocket pairs, the higher the rake, the more they become folds. In MTTs deep, I definitely think you should be flatting these. And these suited connectors as well. A lot of this depends on rake. I think these king, queen off, ace, jack off, I would mostly play as a 3-bet this deep. Leaning towards fold in a cash game. And these hands like ace, king suited, queens, jacks, tens, maybe even nines, I would be playing mostly or almost 100% as a 3-bet, but I'll leave some flats in here for just because population is more flat heavy than I am with these hands. Also, so I've summed it down to 1% exploitation. I have a new computer. It's much slower when running Sims, but it doesn't blue screen when I run Sims, so that's an improvement over my old computer. But yeah, so I'm not simming these down to like super solved, but I think we have a pretty good idea of what's happening on these Sims, and as you can see, if the logs still have it. Yeah, so I ran these for about an hour to get to this point. So I'm not really interested in running it further than that for pretty minimal, I guess, gain on knowledge. I think we have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen on these boards. So, diving into it. On a rainbow board, we're mostly playing check, but we do have some big bets, and I imagine if I send this all the way down, we would have mostly big bets with when we're betting, and mostly we're going to be checking on this board. It's interesting to note that our equity as out of position is pretty big, right? We have over 50% equity. Our repairs are really strong here, but the power of playing in position is that our EV is significantly less than half the pot. So we're really struggling to realize our equity with like king jack suited, king queen suited, king queen offsuit, just because when we see that, we're getting floated a lot and we have to shut down on most turns. And our opponent just gets to win the pot by c-betting turns. And so this is a good equity board for out of position, but a really frustrating board to play as out of position because you miss a lot. But your hands that are strong are pretty much going to win the pot a lot. So aces, kings, queens, it's hard for them to lose on many runouts here. But I would say that most regs and most players are going to be c-betting this board 100%. And that's the node luck that I put in later. But I think that's an important thing to note is that this is a major deviation from what I see most mid to, most, I don't want to say high stakes, but regs in the $10 to, the $500 MTTs that I play, they're probably going to be c-betting 1/3 as a default, probably leaning more towards check as they get better and run more sims against rigs that run sims in the higher stakes tournaments. But for the most part, I would imagine they're 100% c-betting 1/3 on this flop. That is 1/3 pot. And I think this is a good opportunity to learn how to play against that because that's it seems like a major league. So we're going to start out just running it like we're playing according to Pio's line. And we're going to see what we are betting with, what we're checking with, and how we proceed down this line. So we're mostly checking these wheel aces that kind of missed. When we're betting big. And we're betting big with hands that block the backdoor flush draw calls. So blocks their continues, essentially. So king jack of spades is probably just going to be a check fold. We want them to have hands with spades in it because those are going to be their floats. And so when we bet with air, we want them to fold, right? And so we want to unblock their folding range. Makes sense. These hands like king, queen off, mostly check. I don't think I'm getting exploited by not betting these 15% of the time. And I would lean probably 100% check with these hands now. Similar with aces, I think both are fine. Again, we're betting, it seems like more often when we unblock the continuing range, right? We're going to get called more often now, and so we have a value hand, and so we're betting. Cool. And so let's say we're going to play check like we would a majority of our range. In position is betting 1/3 with a lot of stuff. It's checking mostly ace highs, hands with showdown value. The more showdown value it has, these king, queen with backdoor flush draws, it has enough showdown value to check a lot, and so it leans check. But the less showdown value you have, the more it starts betting. So hands like queen jack suited, especially with a backdoor flush draw, it starts betting. I'm not entirely sure. So they're all super similar EVs. I don't think it looks like 0.09% of the pot with queen jack of hearts there between betting big and betting small, or 0.09 chips. So, minuscule portions of the pot. You can pretty much choose. This is just for balance reasons. I would probably 1/3 in position, unless I think I'm going to get check raised a lot, and then I would probably go bigger, or check, right? And so I think that's a decision you can make. And so let's say we're betting 1/3 with 2 overs the backdoor flush draw. And this is how Pio is going to play differently than I think I have been playing and how the population plays, is it's going to check raise these hands that have like 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. So like jack 10 of diamonds, clubs, and hearts, it's going to check raise. And then jack 10 of spades is actually going to check raise some portion of the time. But I would just lean folds, Wow, it's actually check calling. Blowing my mind, but I guess it just feels it has just enough equity against the range. That's weird to me. Hands like 8s, 9s, 10s, jacks, I would be very tempted to check raise these. These are strong but vulnerable hands. Again, would be tempted to check raise and not check call. But, hands like aces, kings, queens, I might be more apt to check call. And hands like ace high, I think we have a very easy check call. I'm probably not going to be turning ace king into a bluff, or I don't even know if this is actually probably for value given the range that we've seen get 1/3 here. So that's an interesting way that Pio is playing this, and I think this is a great way to play it. It's different than the 1/3, and it's kind of very easily splitting our range into bluffs and value hand and very strong value hands. So like 2-overs with the backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. If we get 3-bet on this flop, or if we get jammed on this flop or something like that, we pretty clearly know, okay, Jack 10 of hearts was a bluff, pocket jacks was for value. Whereas if we just 1/3 our entire range and we get floated and then the turn's a brick and then we're in a lot of trouble, knowing what we're doing with our range and what our opponent has, this just seems like a much more clear way to punish white floats, develop a really strong bluff and value range, and just, I don't know. It seems like a much better way to play it than the standard 1/3. And so I'm going to see one more street here. What happens if we turn a backdoor flush draw, or if we don't, if we're just giving up, if we turn no equity. So we'll do raise and then a call. I have an all-in node here, but we're not really doing that. There's another raise node here, but we're not really doing that. I think when we get into flop 4 bets, we're probably going too deep. So let's see. Let's start off with a really good card. Let's say we have Jack 10 of hearts and we turn the 9 of hearts. Literally everything keeps going that turns equity. Yeah, so King Queen of diamonds is going to check give up, but King Queen of hearts is going to bet 1/3. Love it. I think that makes a lot of sense. We pick up equity, yada yada. All these open enders. 9x now becomes a value bet with for betting 1/3. I like that too. I think that's really smart. We can definitely get value from worse, especially against population that I think might still have ace highs or like, pocket 3s, even though those are mostly a call now. But yeah, I think that makes sense. And then it looks like in position, Queen Jack of hearts is going to raise, not all in, but it's going to raise. And I probably wouldn't play this as a raise, but I wonder if it raise calls. Yeah, it mixes. Okay, so that's cool to know. That okay, essentially we're saying when we pick up equity, we're going to 1/3, and when we don't, we're just going to check fold. But now let's try and see this is just like another brick. Let's give it, I don't know, the 2 of spades. We become more polar because a lot of our backdoor, or I'm thinking we become more polar because a lot of our backdoor check raises now have completely bricked and we're not going to be continuing with them. And honestly, it looks like it just keeps going with these hands that unblock backdoor flush draws. And I guess that's probably why it's check raising Jack 10 of spades, is so that when we break the turn, we could still have bluffs. But that's cool. I probably wouldn't do that. I'd be worried. But yeah, it seems like these are primarily how it's constructing bluffs on the turn. It's when all of our backdoors brick, we need to have some of these Jack 10 of spades type hands, because then we have no bluffs on the turn, which is cool, but I'm scared. Against population, I'd be pretty scared. But anyway, that's a cool way to look at this. I think this is a good strategy, and I feel like I do have a better understanding now, because I would probably have just 1/3 at that flop. So let's go to 8/4 two-tone. Again, I didn't solve it all the way. Ran it for about an hour, got to 1% exploitability. And the first thing that I notice here is we are playing almost pure check. I think we had 63% check, and now we are at 80%. Again, this is just worse for us. Our equity and our EV have gotten worse. And our position has obviously stayed the same, so I don't mind check here. Let's take a look. If we check, interesting to note, in position now bets bigger more often than small. Okay, good to know. On two-tone boards where we start to bluff more often on the turn. I wonder if that's a function of just having more bluffs. And I think these flush draw type hands just don't want to get check raised. And so it starts bluffing with these 2 overs plus backdoor flush draws, and has more flushes in the check back range. And obviously the worse showdown we get, the more we start to just say go for it. Yeah, that makes sense to me. yeah, and these hands that will rep clubs on the turn, I guess, are going to start betting big. And so let's see if we still get check raised. We almost never get check raised now. It looks like out of position does a lot of check calling. I'm going to check against the 1/3 just because that's what we used on the previous flop. Okay, 20% check raise. Similar stuff. Check raise, unblocking backdoor flush draws. It's interesting. You know, because in the original one, I guess this is just a function of equity now. But yeah, it's definitely a marked change from the previous board where they would have a lot of floats. On rainbow boards, on two-tone boards, it seems like we're just more equity driven. So, okay. Let's do bet 60. And we're playing almost a pure call with all of our hands. Actually, let's do the 1/3 because that's what we did in the first flop. Raise and call. So now let's try the 9 of hearts. Again, we see the same 1/3 bet. I like that a lot. And then let's instead now do the deuce of spades. And it starts to make ourselves more polar because we have less bluffs. Or it starts to make ourselves more polar because, you know, our hands are either really strong or really weak. Now we have no backdoor flush draw type hands. Interesting, it's turning ace deuce. It's betting for the size. Yeah, very interesting. I'm not really sure what it's doing with these like king 9 of spades types hands. I guess it's just trying to fold out like flush draws. But you know, I guess against like 6-7 of clubs, you do have the best hand, but they have a lot of equity. But I don't imagine that folds in position. So yeah, that's interesting. That is. That is a different way to think about it. I'm not entirely sure what's happening on these turns, especially on this two-tone board. I'm a little confused. I'll have to look at it more. But I think the important stuff is more flop play. Just getting ourselves away from the 1/3 and understanding that, okay, when we check raise and the turn bricks, we tend to bet bigger, and when it brings in another draw, we improve more often. We have more 2-overs, and so we can 1/3 for value with 9x, and we can 1/3 with our draws. And here on the deuce, we rarely improve, and we're repping a strong range, so we tend to bet bigger. Cool. And now the final thing I want to do is I want to go over a node-locked version on this two-tone board where out of position, again, I really didn't solve this all the way through, bets 100%. I'll label this the bad reg strat. Something that I think most regs are going to be doing, but is as we've seen, wrong. And so again, the EV of this strat is quite bad. I think it probably loses, a full 2 chips in a 75 chip pot. So maybe 3% of the pot, 2 to 3% of the pot. Pretty bad when you're losing 2 to 3% of the pot by having a lazy strat. Generally, the 1/3 is going to be pretty equivalent, but I think 3% of the pot is significant loss. So that's cool to see that this is a way to gain a lot of EV by not doing this. So when we bet 1/3, we're looking to see what our response is because our opponents are going to be doing this a lot and we want to exploit it. We raise 8x pretty frequently. That makes sense. We raise it small. Actually, only give it 1 raise size, but I mean, honestly, we're just raising in position with a lot of stuff. King 10 of spades, literally no back, just 2-overs, no back doors. We're really never folding. Having a 7% fold frequency here is pretty funny. Our MDF is 25% against the 1/3, and now we're folding 7% of the time. And we're actually raising a third of the time, which is interesting. So let's see what we're raising. Everything at some frequency. What are we folding? Everything at some frequency. But yeah, I guess so. Like these queen ten of spades type hands, they're just not good enough to call. So I guess you have to raise or fold them. But yeah, 2 overs backdoor flush draw, you raise. 2 overs and you can rep a backdoor flush draw. You know, king queen with the king of diamonds, queen of clubs, king of clubs, queen of diamonds, you're raising. Just pure 2 overs, king 10 of spades is strong enough to call. You know, this is why 1/3ing on this flop, even though you have an equity advantage, is bad. It's because you just get called by king 10 of spades. And so if you're playing against a very face-up, like very passive fish, I think you can 1/3 this flop safely. But if you're against somebody that's going to float and defend 93% of their range, like Pio would, you're going to lose a lot of money 1/3ing this flop. Well, let's play it out to a turn and see what happens when we just kind of call IP. I want to see what happens with the king 10 of spades types hand. Let's do the 9 of hearts. That's what we've been doing. Yeah, this is interesting. You know, we essentially have all of our hands still. So this turn is really weird. I don't really know what the I don't know how to interpret this other than we're just betting big a lot. I guess just trying to polarize. I don't know. 80% isn't that big. I wonder what if anything changes if I include overbets. Maybe that's a next time type thing. But yeah, let's see. And then king 10 of spades. It just kind of turns itself into a bluff. It just kind of jams all in IP or folds. I'm mostly letting fold, obviously, but yeah, that's kind of interesting. And then like queen 10, you know, these just gut shots just kind of call. That's crazy. And I guess the plan is to just jam river over a c-bet or whatever. But yeah, that's cool. That's an interesting way to play it. And what happens if we check? They again probably just go 1/3. Yeah, I mean, this is why it's so frustrating if you have like ace jack here and you're just like, well, I probably have the best hand, but how do I check call down against a 1/3? Because then in position could bet like 5s and 6s and 3s for this sizing, and you're just like, you feel like an idiot. But yeah, this is good. This is like, I feel like 6 months ago I would have played like this, and now I'm just kind of getting lazy and 1/3ing, and these study sessions are necessary. So this is cool. Yeah, that's about it. Don't 1/3 this.